A wealthy 24-year-old walked into court acting like the entire justice system was just another inconvenience he could swipe away with money, lawyers, and his last name. But then, the courtroom watched his own father stand up and destroy his defense in front of everyone. And what happened next completely changed the case forever. Before we get into it, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because these real courtroom stories only get crazier from here. This case started with what looked like a simple hit and run. But by the end of the hearing, it became something much bigger, because this wasn't just about a car accident, it was about entitlement, power, and what happens when someone spends their entire life believing consequences are for other people. The morning Dominic Ashford walked into court, he didn't look nervous. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't even look annoyed. He looked bored. That was the first thing the judge noticed. Dominic was 24 years old. Expensive blazer, luxury loafers, perfect haircut, the kind of confidence that usually comes from growing up in rooms where people say yes before you even finish asking the question. And from the second he sat down, the entire atmosphere in the courtroom shifted, because Dominic Ashford wasn't acting like a defendant. He was acting like someone waiting for a delayed flight. He sat before being told to cross his ankle over his knee, pulled out his phone, and that's when the judge stopped everything. Put the phone away, simple instruction. But Dominic responded slowly, almost casually, like even basic courtroom rules were optional suggestions. And judges notice things like that, especially judges who've spent years watching wealthy defendants walk into court, convinced the room will eventually bend around them. But the real tension in this case hadn't even started yet, because sitting across the courtroom from Dominic was a 61-year-old woman named Patricia Oy, and unlike Dominic, Patricia didn't arrive with confidence. She arrived with exhaustion, 19 years, working as a home health aide, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, low pay, no spotlight, no powerful family name. Just a thin folder in her hands and a fractured wrist caused by the man sitting across from her. And when Patricia began telling her story, the courtroom went completely still. The night of the incident, Patricia had just finished another exhausting 12-hour shift caring for an elderly patient. Most people would have gone straight home. But Patricia stopped at a grocery store first, not for herself, for her patient. The elderly woman's refrigerator was nearly empty, so Patricia used her own money to buy groceries before heading home. No reimbursement, no recognition. Just one more quiet act of care from someone who spent her life taking care of people nobody notices. Then everything changed. As Patricia walked through the parking garage toward the elevator, she suddenly heard an engine accelerating. Before she could react, an SUV slammed into her. Groceries exploded across the concrete. Her wrist snapped beneath her as she hit the floor. And then came the part that made the courtroom uncomfortable. The SUV didn't stop. It kept driving straight up the parking ramp, leaving a 61-year-old woman injured on the concrete. But somehow, that still wasn't the worst part, because moments later, Patricia looked up from the ground and saw a young man walking past her toward the stairwell. Not running for help, not asking if she was okay, not calling 911, just walking away. That young man was Dominic Ashford. And as Patricia quietly described the moment, the judge began watching Dominic very carefully, but Dominic never looked directly at her. Instead, he stared slightly above her head. That tiny detail mattered, because judges spend years learning how people behave when they don't fully see another human being as real. And Dominic looked exactly like someone emotionally detached from the damage he caused. Then came the first major turning point. The judge asked Dominic a simple question. Were you aware someone had been injured? And Dominic finally spoke, but his answer sounded strange, overly polished, overly rehearsed. He didn't say, I didn't see her. He didn't say it was dark. Instead, he launched into language about visual challenges, environmental perception, and low-light conditions, the kind of carefully engineered answer that sounds less like truth and more like preparation. And that's when the judge noticed something important. Innocent people usually sound human. People hiding behind strategy sound rehearsed. Then the judge said the sentence that completely changed the room. Your perception of events is on the footage. Let's watch it together. And suddenly, Dominic stopped looking comfortable. The courtroom lights dimmed. The surveillance footage appeared on the monitor. 44 seconds. That's all it took. The SUV entered the parking garage, moving way too fast for a private structure. Patricia appeared in frame, then impact. She hit the ground instantly. Groceries scattered everywhere. And the SUV kept going. No brake lights, no hesitation, nothing. But then the footage got even worse. Seconds later, Dominic appeared exiting the elevator. He walked directly past Patricia, lying on the concrete, and never stopped. The courtroom became silent because some evidence doesn't require interpretation. It requires honesty. But instead of admitting what everyone had just watched, Dominic's attorney stepped in. And this is where the case turned into something much uglier. His lawyer, Warren Finch, was powerful, experienced the kind of attorney younger lawyers study from a distance. And he immediately started doing what elite defense attorneys do best, not denying the footage, complicating it. He talked about lighting distortion, camera compression, perspective issues, frame interpretation. Every technical phrase designed to soften something brutally simple. Then he introduced the Ashford family name into the conversation, carefully, subtly, the family's charitable donations, their hospital endowments, affordable housing projects, business investments, community impact. And everyone in the room understood exactly what was happening because the message wasn't hidden. It was this family matters. And for a moment, the courtroom felt the weight of wealth entering the case. But then Judge Judy-style justice hit like a freight train. The judge calmly leaned forward and asked one question. Is your father in the courtroom today? Everything froze. Dominic didn't answer immediately. His attorney didn't move, but one junior associate accidentally glanced toward the third row, and that was enough. Then the judge said something nobody expected. Mr. Richard Ashford, if you are present, identify yourself. A man slowly stood up in the gallery. And the second Dominic saw his father standing there, his entire posture changed. The confidence disappeared instantly. No more relaxed expression, no more strategic boredom, no more emotional distance. Because suddenly, this became real. Richard Ashford walked to the front of the courtroom. No dramatic speech, no media performance, no arrogance, just quiet disappointment. Then he did something almost nobody expected. He sided against his own son in open court. Richard admitted the footage was clear. He admitted Dominic hit Patricia. He admitted his son walked away from an injured woman. And then he said something that shattered the entire defense strategy. No camera angle changes what happened. The courtroom went dead silent. Because in one sentence, he destroyed every technical excuse the defense had been building. But he wasn't done. Richard Ashford then turned toward Patricia and apologized directly to her, not as a businessman, not as a public figure, as a father ashamed of what his son had done. And then came the moment that truly changed everything. Richard faced the judge and said his family's wealth, influence, and donations should have absolutely no impact on the outcome of the case. That moment mattered because powerful families often protect themselves at all costs. But Richard Ashford did the opposite. He removed the shield completely, and for the first time all morning, Dominic looked exposed. Then Judge Judy-style accountability finally arrived. The judge began reading the facts back slowly. A 61-year-old caregiver, a 12-hour shift, groceries purchased for someone else, a parking garage with a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit, a reckless driver, an injured woman left on the ground, and a young man who walked past her without stopping. Then the verdict came down. Guilty on every count: reckless endangerment, failure to render aid, hit and run. But the punishment was where things became unforgettable, because the judge wasn't interested in symbolic consequences. The judge wanted Dominic to actually understand the people he spent his life overlooking. First came restitution, medical bills, lost wages. Every damaged grocery item, every dollar accounted for, but the judge added one condition that hit harder than the money itself. Dominic had to pay personally, not his father, not family accounts, not corporate attorneys. Him, because if he was old enough to walk past an injured woman, he was old enough to feel the financial consequences himself. Then came the suspension of his driver's license for an entire year. But the biggest punishment was still coming: 240 hours of mandatory community service inside the city's elder care volunteer program, helping seniors, transporting elderly residents, delivering groceries, providing companionship, directly serving people exactly like Patricia. And then the judge added one final condition: a handwritten apology, no attorneys, no PR team, no corporate wording. If it sounded fake, he'd write it again, and just when everyone thought the hearing was over. Richard Ashford spoke one final time. He announced that Dominic's access to family money would be suspended for the entire duration of the sentence. Then he looked at his son and said something brutal. "I put our name on buildings. I should have made sure you understood what it means to earn one." And honestly, that line hit harder than the verdict itself, because for the first time in his life, Dominic Ashford was standing in a room where absolutely nothing bent for him. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. 6 months later, the elder care program director sent an update to the court. Dominic had already completed 94 hours, no missed assignments, no complaints, and apparently something started changing. At first, he acted exactly how you'd expect: polite, precise, emotionally distant, like someone completing an obligation instead of helping people. But then one interaction shifted everything. An elderly man refused to attend a medical appointment because he was embarrassed about needing help. Most volunteers tried convincing him. Dominic didn't. He simply sat beside the man and talked to him normally for 10 minutes until the man finally agreed to go. That moment mattered to the program director, because that's when Dominic stopped treating people like tasks and started treating them like human beings. And then the judge received something nobody expected: Dominic's handwritten apology, 2 full pages, no excuses, no mention of lighting conditions, no mention of perception, no technical language, just accountability. He admitted he drove past someone in pain. He admitted he failed. And he admitted he didn't fully understand what that failure meant until he started working with elderly people whose entire lives depended on small acts of kindness from strangers. Then came the line that stayed with the judge the longest. Dominic wrote that he couldn't stop thinking about Patricia buying groceries for someone else after a 12-hour shift. That detail haunted him because, for the first time, he understood the humanity he ignored. And maybe the most powerful moment of the entire story came from one tiny detail in the elder care director's report. She said another volunteer once noticed Dominic sitting in his car outside the building for 11 straight minutes before every shift, just sitting there alone, like he was fighting himself before walking inside. But eventually, he always opened the door and went in anyway. And honestly, that might be what real accountability actually looks like. Not perfection, not public speeches, not dramatic redemption arcs. Just someone forcing themselves to become better, one uncomfortable decision at a time. Because the truth is, justice isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about confrontation. Sometimes it's about forcing someone to finally see the people they've spent their whole lives overlooking, and that's exactly what happened here. Dominic Ashford walked into court believing wealth could soften reality. But by the end, he learned the one thing money can never purchase: human regard. And maybe the most important sentence in this entire case came much later from the elder care director herself. He has begun learning their names, not their duties, not their conditions, their names, because once people become real to you, it gets a lot harder to walk past them. And maybe that's the real lesson of this entire courtroom story. Justice isn't revenge. It's consequence, recognition, and when possible, repair. If this story hit you as hard as it hit that courtroom, comment below and tell us what you think about the father exposing his own son in court. And if you enjoy real courtroom drama, justice-served stories, and powerful emotional cases like this one, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next case is even more unbelievable.